Broadcasting worldwide to make a difference. This is Positive Impact Radio.
So if I said to you that I know for a fact that you have suffered trauma at least one point in your life, what would you say? I'm sure there would be some people that would respond with, no, I've never really had a trauma. But amazingly, we think that it's something big, something huge, like a car accident, a fire, something really big. But it doesn't have to be something like that to impact your life and literally hold you back from living your best life. We're going to talk about trauma today with a focus on men. A lot of times men aren't talking about this kind of stuff. And wait till you find out what is considered trauma and what could be holding you back. This gentleman works with men of all ages, anywhere, seriously, on the planet. And his company is mindaligned.com. And he's Conrad Lipic. He's back with us. Hey, Conrad, how you doing today?
Doing well, Steve. Pleasure to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. And this is such an important topic to dig into. When it comes to trauma, most of what we're talking about that impacts us as adults is stuff that happened in our childhood. Do I have that right?
For many people, yes. It is something that happened in the childhood, maybe adolescence, teen years, and then once we get older, some people do, depending on their profession, like military or EMT, first responders, police, firemen.
Sure.
They tend to get a lot of trauma more in the early adulthood years or mid-adulthood years. But also there are individuals later in life, the geriatric population, who also are experiencing trauma, especially, loss of most or all of their friends.
Even when you're a child and you're walking past the kitchen, you're 7 years old, 6, whatever, and you hear something. And it wasn't even focused at you. It was an adult conversation, but you heard something and you internalized it. And that subconsciously held you back from moving your life forward. Or let's say you got bullied on the playground. It's traumatic. It was a kid thing. And, you think it was done, but it's not, because it's still stuck in your mind. And that can hold you back from feelings of self-confidence, lacking that, or not good enough. How do you want to focus on this today? We talking about the major traumas, things that are maybe not as big?
Yeah, we can actually dive into both. What are the differences between major traumas, which we typically call capital T traumas, and then more of the, I guess you could call it minor traumas or lowercase t traumas. So we could go into the differences on both of those, kind of showing the two different sides of the same coin. We
Sure.
can do that if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's look at childhood. Those lowercase t traumas we're focusing on here. What are some of those?
So lowercase t traumas in childhood, maybe it's bullying on the playground, parents yelling at you, where, as you had said, that leads to internal negative core beliefs like I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, no one's going to want me the way that I am. So those can be lowercase t traumas, but depending on the severity of it, it could turn into capital T trauma that really impacts somebody for most of their life if they don't get help.
Is it stuck in your subconscious?
When it goes to the trauma level, then yeah, it does get into the subconscious. That's where we see, nightmares. Maybe it doesn't get to a full-blown nightmare, but difficulty sleeping, like not being able to fall asleep right away, waking up well before your alarm clock, waking up not feeling refreshed. Then we also get into, hypervigilance. Maybe you are on the lookout for, let's say that one parent, will just go with dad because they're typically the enemy in these situations. I use that word enemy in air quotes.
Gotcha.
But, maybe it's, is dad home? I need to avoid him. Or is he drinking? If he's drinking, I need to be quiet as a mouse so I don't disturb him and, feel his wrath. It could be like that as well.
Well, a lot of times in a lot of family structures, the father is the authoritarian. The punishment
Right.
comes from dad a lot of times. And, I could reasonably see that. But all of these things can challenge us in adult life with our future relationships.
They can, yes.
Even
Yeah,
when,
and so
yeah, let's
go ahead.
look at that. I feel that that's a huge thing for a lot of people.
Okay. So taking these traumas and moving them into the relationship realm is fascinating for me. This leads to maybe someone love bombs someone. They're like, I'm going to throw so much love at you because I'm feeling it right now and I want to express it. And then about 2 weeks, a month, maybe they get to 2 months later on down the road, and all of a sudden they're like, I'm just not feeling it anymore. I don't feel anything. And it's kind of like when I was younger and my emotions are dried up. I'm not feeling anything. And so that's one way we can see trauma from our younger years playing out in relationships. Another is being very avoidant, not feeling, very secure in relationships. That could be another one. Or maybe you're so anxious because it's like, oh, I just need to make sure that you love me, because if you don't love me, no one else is. And I'm going to, throw all my love and emotions at you and try to spend all my time with you. And if you're not around, I don't feel full. I don't feel complete, or don't feel complete. And so it can really manifest in quite a few different ways. And no two people are really the same. You could have, say, two twins, and they go through the same situation but come out completely different.
Even the fear of abandonment, I'm sure that's big. Let's say your parents got divorced when you were younger, and that made an imprint, or, let's say a pet passed away after that, and then now you fear being left alone, and you seek out. You have an attachment situation.
Yeah, that is very true. And one interesting thing is I've even had a few clients, not many, but I've had a few who go into the realm of polyamory because they feel that with the trauma that they've had when they were younger, having multiple partners is their solution. And so, that gets to a whole nother realm. There's nothing wrong with polyamory, but are you doing it correctly, or are you doing it to escape trauma? That's where the real question is.
Never thought of it that way. Wow. Interesting. Let's go back to the love bombing. By the way, I haven't heard that term in a while, but it's a good one. In that situation where somebody enters a relationship and pours on the love, it's all fantastic, everything's great. And like you said, 2 months later realizes, well, I don't know, I'm kind of empty now. I'm not feeling it. When they initially felt that rush of love and positivity, was that real, or was that amped up because of a trauma?
To them, it was real.
Okay.
And so I always tell my clients, I'm like, I believe that you believe that that was love, which might take a moment to really sink in. But what I'm saying is that for them, that's what they believed, and I believe them when they say that. However, that typically is amped up and is a trauma response.
And then the feeling of just not having the feeling, where does that come from in the trauma response?
Typically, and again, not 100%, but typically that comes from our younger years when the trauma actually occurred, and us giving out our love and affection, but it not being returned. And with it not being returned, we started to lose that love and affection that we gave out, and we didn't feel it. Because maybe it was dad's always at work, and mom was so stressed trying to both work and keep the household going while dad just worked and drank, that I tried to shower them in love and affection, but I got nothing in return. Or maybe I got something in return like every few months, but it was when mom was high on marijuana, or maybe it was that one occasion dad was affectionate towards us, but then it was quickly overshadowed by, 3 months of drinking.
So really what it comes down to in this scenario is that somebody wanted to give love, they were feeling love, but they weren't getting back what they expected to get back, which ties into their childhood, their lowercase t trauma. And I think it's reasonable that we point out that one child may experience a similar situation. Doesn't even bother them. It rolls off their shoulder, no problem. Another child, it makes a traumatic imprint, if you will, and now they're, I guess the best description, scarred for life until they confront that trauma and find a way to move past it.
Yeah, and really that's the thing, is you need to confront your trauma. And I'm not saying do exposure therapy, but working with a life coach, transformational coach, or even with a therapist. So doing any of that can help. Now the difference, and we talked about this on a previous episode, is with therapy you're looking more at the past and how it impacts the present.
Yep.
And with coaching it's more, how the present is going to impact your future. And so I'd say a combination of those would work great. Or if you really want to just dive into one, go for it.
Lowercase t trauma, we've talked about. Let's go to the uppercase T.
Okay. These are the heavy hitters. I mean, you're looking at, you are definitely going to be, your sleep's going to be impacted. If you have a spouse, you may be sleeping in a different bed because you're thrashing around at night. You wake up with cold sweats. Difficulty falling asleep, waking up early, things like that, similar with what we talked about a little bit ago. But you're also looking at, you might hallucinate. You may see people or things that aren't actually there in reality that no one else sees. You may have a really negative outlook on yourself or the world, like the world's effed up, let the place burn. Or I'm not a good person, so screw it. I'm going to keep acting like an a-hole. Hypervigilance is definitely a thing. You hear a loud noise, you jump up, you spin around to where the noise is and assess the situation. You don't feel safe anywhere. Even in your house, you might get up and check the locks a few times. And because you're so hypervigilant on checking the locks, you may forget that you left the stove on.
Wow.
And then wake up the next morning and you're like, oh, shoot, the stove is on. Forgot all about that. So, yeah.
Do most people with uppercase T trauma know that they've got something going on and that it's tied to a traumatic experience?
I'm not going to go 100%, but there many do realize what's going on. Yes.
Okay.
And they're able to correlate it with what's going on. Some people are like, it could be this or it could be that. And then that's where a specialist comes in and says, okay, let's kind of go through things. And then they parse it out. And honestly, it could be an accumulation of different traumas. You could have maybe 5 to 10, hypothetically, lowercase t traumas. And then all of a sudden you have a lot of post-traumatic stress symptoms from many different events. Or you could even have multiple uppercase T traumas. Let's talk about, military personnel real quick, because that's a lot of who I deal with sometimes, is maybe they went to combat and on one deployment, they lost 2 people in their platoon to a roadside bomb. Next deployment, or even that same deployment, different time, they lost someone to enemy gunfire. Or maybe they ended up losing a limb from a roadside bomb as well. And so there are all these different traumas that just compile on top of each other, and you have to address each trauma. But together they make the stressors that your body goes under even worse. And sometimes what's really interesting is our body holds the trauma so much that we start to experience medical conditions.
Yes.
And doctors don't look at the mental health aspects. They're like, well, here's your medication for high blood pressure, and of that pain you're experiencing, well, here's, 800 milligrams of Motrin, take it as you need it. And so they really look at just addressing the symptoms instead of the cause.
Interesting you bring that up. And Conrad, you made a correlation for me for somebody I know. I met him about 2 or 3 years ago. And we haven't seen each other in a while. We used to hang a little bit more. Just great guy, just, fun guy to be around. And he's got some military PTSD. And he knows it. And he's also had a situation where he had a girlfriend and she had a stroke and basically passed away in front of him. So now, just what you said, the layers of trauma. He's forever dealing with stomach issues. And it's been said that everything we deal with centers in our stomach. And I texted him last week and I said, hey, how's it going? What are you up to? He was in the hospital for about a week with diverticulitis and some other issues, and it's probably going to need surgery. And based on what you just said, I'm in my heart convinced that that's happening to him because it's manifesting because of the PTSD and dealing with all of that.
Yeah, it very well could be. And, if you get to it in time, you can not get to the point that your friend's in. But once it gets to that point where you need surgery, even if you do a lot of therapy and coaching to get over the situation, there's already some damage that's been done to your system. And so it might stop further damage or at least, minimize future damage, but some is still already done to your body. And so that's why getting help as soon as you can or as soon as you recognize an issue is so important.
Now, often when we hear PTSD, we connect it to the military. It's not just that, though. How do you describe PTSD in general?
Sure. So I like to drop the D. I don't really consider it a disorder. It's a natural response to a traumatic event. And that's typically how I refer to it as my clients. I'm like, yeah, you have post-traumatic stress. Something stressful in your life happened. Something traumatic in your life happened. And now you're experiencing stress due to that event or events. And that's really how I describe it to them. Does that answer the question, or are you looking for a little bit more in-depth?
Tiny bit more in terms of the types of post-traumatic stress that somebody may have. Like a couple of examples of situations.
Sure. So a couple examples. We'll stick with uppercase T. Let's say police officer pulls somebody over. Everything's going normal, and then they get clipped by a car as it drives past because the person's texting and driving. Puts them in the hospital, and now they're like, I don't want to get out and do another, traffic ticket because even though I did everything perfect, or so I thought, I still got clipped by a passing car. So that could be an uppercase T. Another example, you go into a burning building and a fireman goes into a room and there's a crib that's on fire. And I'm going to get really dark here. And they see a baby burnt to death. And that sticks in their mind. That's another example of an uppercase T trauma. But we could also go to natural disasters. Let's say you're I'll give two different ones. Let's say you're in Florida. A hurricane comes through. You don't get out in time, or it's like the weather service says it's not going to be that bad, but then all of a sudden it picks up and the category jumps up and it just destroys your house. You barely make it out alive. That can cause uppercase T trauma. Or maybe let's just go to the other side of the country, California, where there's a lot of earthquakes. Let's say earthquake hits and it turns out to be 9.0 and you're in a skyrise. Major damage to the skyrise. It almost falls over and, you are clinging on for your life. Someone pulls you up. Then you finally make it down to the base floor. And when you do, let's just say the building topples over. You barely made it out of there alive. That could also lead to an uppercase T trauma.
My gosh, even hearing those, I feel it. Just hearing that, picturing myself or somebody in that situation. Now take it to the real side of it. I can't even imagine. And is it possible that somebody went through something like that and doesn't realize that they're dealing with the after effects of that?
Yeah, it's very possible. They may be like, oh, other people went through worse.
Right.
I'm okay.
Oh, and especially, let's
other
go.
People need the help. Yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off, but we center on men here. So
Sure.
picture that tough cop in that roadway stop, or that firefighter goes in and finds that baby in the crib. They might turn around and say, that was horrible, it's traumatic, that doesn't affect me, I got to keep going. When in reality, they're crushed inside, but they don't even know what's going on and how it's affecting their lives.
Right. And a lot of times they turn to dark humor. Maybe the fireman who saw the dead baby, in order to get over it, they start telling dead baby jokes.
Right.
And so that's their coping mechanism. And they're like, oh, I'm okay. I can joke about that now, even though they may dream about it, or it still impact them if they hear a crying baby, something like that.
How do we heal from these traumas? Starting obviously with coaching or some kind of counseling for sure, but is there more that goes on to help move somebody along? And right now I'm talking about the big T.
Yeah. So with that, support groups are big. There are survivor groups that you're able to connect with others who have gone through very similar events that you have. And those are a great way to just connect and get a community. And so aside from coaching, aside from counseling, doing a recovery group, journaling about it, putting in the work outside of coaching and outside of therapy, if you have a really good therapist or coach, they're going to give you action items to do between sessions, because that's really where the work comes in, is between sessions. Also, I like to do internal work with my clients where, we'll look inside and address what's going on internally. Like, where are you feeling this? And what does it feel like? Or maybe it is talking to your younger self and saying, what do you wish you would have said? Or what do you wish would have happened? And now talk to them, show them compassion, show them love. Doing things along those lines as well. Between sessions, it could also be good to just get out and not stay isolated. And getting out doesn't mean you have to go to, say, a support group or go out and introduce yourself to a bunch of people. It could just be you go to a coffee shop and you just sit there and let the energy of the place wash over you. That way you're not alone at home, maybe with the curtains closed. You're actually out there feeling the sun on you. I'm a big advocate of going out into the woods and just hiking, going on a nature trail, and just reconnecting with nature and reminding us that we are connected to everything else and it's going to be okay. So I'm a big advocate of that as well for my clients.
I completely agree with you. And I think many of us underestimate the power of nature and what it can do to ground you and heal you. And I love live music. I will go see anything live. I don't care what it is. I don't care if I'm not into that music. I like the energy in the room. I like there's something there. Yeah. And it just, for me, you're never alone when you're with a crowd of people doing something at the same time that they're doing, taking in a show, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also one other uppercase T that I really want to discuss with your audience, because I have actually a lot of men who talk to me about this, is a lot of men have been raped, and it is by women. And they're like, I really didn't want to have sex, but, I was pressured into it. And it's not the traditional rape that we know of, someone is overpowering you and forcing you. It's that more subtle. It's like, I was drunk, I didn't want to do it, we did it anyway. Or maybe they weren't drunk and they're like, I was peer pressured into it by my friends or by her. She just kept saying, things that kept triggering me, and I felt as a man I had to do it. And that's an uppercase T trauma that actually quite a few of my clients experience.
Never thought of that. And as a man, it's something that you don't even want to talk about, especially when it comes to a woman. It's like, most men are looking for that. And
Right.
now it's the reverse of it. And understandably, if it's not what you want to do at that moment, then it can turn into a trauma.
Right. And the way that our society is, it's men just need to shut up and do it. Or as a man, you're always wanting sex, but that's not the case.
Right. Yeah. And especially men who might not be able to perform at that moment, but you may be forced into something or coerced into something else that somebody's asking for at that time. Wow. Didn't even think of that. And yeah, without a doubt, that's a big T trauma that you hold inside. And I have to believe, too, a lot of the things that we're talking about, because we are talking about men, keep that trauma inside. And it can get very complex. And then there's a trauma after that because you've kept it inside. Does it layer up after a while?
It really does. And when I talk with my clients, I say, hey, it's like a weed. You're seeing all of the leaves that are popped up above ground, but really it's that network of roots below ground. That's where we need to target, because we can clip the leaves, but they're going to keep growing back. And with a lot of people, it's not just one root, it's multiple roots.
When you work with men on traumas, do they have to relive those situations in the counseling and the coaching?
No, they do not. I don't need to know all the details. Maybe just a very, very broad stroke, 10,000 view, look of what happened. But then after that, it's a lot of where are you feeling it in your body? How is it manifesting? Let's work on what is going on so that we can kind of remove the emotion from it to really work on how it's impacting you. And so we don't need to relive the actual moment, at least not right away. But later on, we're probably going to have to go a little bit more into detail just to make sure all the roots are plucked out. But the very first thing I want to do is I want to work on the emotions, because if we try to go to the roots right away, the emotions are just going to eat them up, and they're most likely not going to come back to sessions because they're like, I just can't handle all the emotions that are going on. It's actually worse now than before.
Sure. And you've shared a little bit about your past, and you mentioned in an example before, roadside bomb. You experienced that, am I correct?
That is correct. There was actually a roadside bomb that knocked me unconscious in Iraq in 2006. When I woke up, I was in a cloud of dust and cement block particulate. I could only see about 2-3 inches outside of the Humvee. I was coughing. I initially thought I was dead. And then the ringing in my ears stopped. I started hearing the other people in my Humvee, which was dead. We weren't able to turn it on for who knows how long. And that was a very traumatizing moment, one of many for that deployment for me. And as a combat medic, I'm seeing truckloads of dead bodies, having to say, yep, this person's dead, or working on somebody who's near death. So there was a lot of trauma that went on, not to mention the gunfights and other explosions.
No words. Thank you for your service and just the resilience, what you must have had to go through in your healing of PTS. Wow. You get it. Yeah, there's no other way to describe it. You totally get it. And I didn't know you were a combat medic. So take that now, we talk about layers, take that even going layers deeper, going through that bombing incident and now have to take care of your comrades then and other times. Wow.
Right. Yes, because we're taking care of them before taking care of you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, being transparent, and just your understanding of what men are going through. And me understanding what you went through when you were in the Army. Now I understand why you do what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I truly do.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, it didn't. It came. The dust has cleared in my mind, and not that I didn't know, but now I see your sensitivity, and as an empath, how you want to help others heal because you went through a lot. Conrad, how do we connect with you? If this is resonating, somebody's looking for some guidance, some transformation, just they know they need to move their life forward, or they know they're stuck and maybe they're not totally sure. How do they connect with you?
Sure. They can reach out to me through my website at mindaligned.com. Any emails that go through there, or if you reach out to me via phone through there as well, that all goes to me, and I'll be the one that responds to you. So that's the best way to reach me.
Thank you so much for today and our talks. Just you really get it. You do. And you understand what men go through. And I'm glad we got a chance to talk about all of it.
I am too. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.
Broadcasting worldwide to make a difference. This is Positive Impact Radio.